The most epic part of a healing journey is that it is just that. It is a journey. Oh my gosh, this episode today was really hard to record for sure. So Lex has been traveling for a couple weeks. She led 2 retreats in Mexico, which she talks about a little bit in today's episode. So for the last couple weeks, I have been riding solo, doing a lot of soul work, trying to feed my soul and energize my body and my mind. Because as we all know, if you listen to this podcast, I'm feeling like I'm going through like a large transition phase right now. Today's episode was hard to record because I was in such a vulnerable space post sharing what I shared last episode. And I was like vulnerably hungover. I was so depleted and so tired and almost like I felt a little empty. And I was coming from a place where I was almost beating up on myself a little bit. I was kind of coming from like a self-sabotaging place just due to all of the emotions. And I have been so intently working on myself that for the last couple of days, I've just kind of been resting. And I texted Lexi immediately after we recorded and I was like, I want to re-record. Like, I just felt so depleted and I felt like I wasn't present and I've just been beating up on myself because again, all healing journeys are journeys. There's ups, there's downs, there's peaks, there's pitfalls. And I recognized I was in a weird space, but I was willing to hop on the microphone to record because that's what is so authentic about this podcast and this community. But Lexi is my rock. She encouraged me to keep the recording because it's a part of the process and of the journey. And we'll look back on this period and be able to learn so much. And she was like, why don't you just hop on and talk a little bit in the beginning of the episode? So here I am. Hi, it's Kristin. Holy cow. I want to preface this by saying, and I don't think any of my close friends listen to this podcast, which I'm glad they don't because boundaries, I don't force them to at all. I love having like my friends be my friends and not them knowing all of this shit I talk about on here. But anyway, the people closest to me in my life know really well that I have gone on a roller coaster the last couple of years. I would say honestly, just since graduating college, it's been super high moments, super low moments, twisty turns in between. There's that upside down part of the roller coaster. As of recently, the last like 2.5, 3 years, I've been on this spiritual journey where I've had really high moments, and you can definitely hear this on the podcast as well. Like it's documenting my journeys, but I've had these highest of high moments. And then I'm like, I'm awake. I'm spiritually awake. I've found the answers. I feel like I'm floating on air. Everything's good. And then a couple weeks later, I'm back down and I'm like questioning everything again. And I'm like, what happened? I thought I was like woke and I thought I was like, I thought I was like in the midst of a spiritual transformation. And here I am present day. And I was talking to one of my girlfriends about this last night. And I was like sobbing on the phone to her. And it wasn't like a sad sob. It was more of a just, I'm allowing myself to feel as of recently. And I was like crying with her on the phone. And I was like, don't you ever feel like I'm crazy? Like when you listen to me talk, when I call you and every other week, it's like some intense high and then it's some intense low. Do you ever think I'm crazy? And she was laughing and she was like, Kristin, do you remember like 2 years ago when I would call you every day going through the same thing? And that's when she reminded me of my own words. It's the human experience. And I had like a reflection period where I was like, oh, I'm so lucky that I can feel this deeply. It's a blessing and a curse. But I judged myself for a second, and I was really insecure about my own journey because I was like, I was telling her, I even feel like on this podcast, I share when I'm going through these really awake moments, and I share when I'm kind of at the lowest of low. And I almost like was like, oh, I wonder if our audience judges me. I wonder if our community is like, this bitch is crazy. Like she's constantly circling and going through it. But then I had to like step back and allow my ego to take a back seat and realize, again, it's just part of the experience. So coming off of an episode where I was really vulnerable and raw, and I shared a lot about where I am, and then sitting down and recording again and just kind of feeling a little low and low energy it was a really interesting feeling. I was kind of at war with my ego of, you just did this awesome episode where you shared so much, and here you are showing up today and you don't have that much to share. It took a minute to register that I have to take that pressure off of my plate and just allow myself to be a human. And then I really wanted to share an experience that I've had um, this week. And that was going to a tarot reader. I got my full cards read, and then we did a rebalancing of my chakra type of work, not a full chakra balancing, but we talked more about that. And then we did a meditation, prayer, shower energy thing, which I'm going to get all into right now. So I spoke about it on today's episode. And the reason I wanted to re-record was because after my tarot reading, I realized like I am creating my present and my future by living in my past. Anytime I feel judgment come up or I feel ego start to speak, if I have like an exchange with a friend and then I start to judge that exchange, I'm like, oh, did I come off weird? Like that is all just past situations manifesting in my body. And this tarot reader helped me see that very clearly, that I project a lot of my past into my present day and my future, which is something that I can now put my finger on because I've talked about not feeling connected to myself for so long. And now after the last couple of days and this reading, I feel like I can put my finger on what the disconnect is. My body is here on present day, but my mind is stuck somewhere in the past. So I had this kind of like come to Jesus moment this week. I think it was just overflooded with emotions from the episode that I shared, a lot of dark work that I've been doing, a lot of shadow work I've been doing these last couple of weeks. You guys know, if you listened to last episode, I had a big meltdown and a lot of things were brought to surface for me. I kind of had like a desperation moment of, it involved just really exposing like everything that I've done and everything that's happened over the last couple of years, and just really putting a lot of my energy out into the universe when it didn't need to happen. Like that's kind of what the meltdown was about. And I just felt so depleted after. And I felt good the next couple of days, realizing it was a human experience moment, that it wasn't a mistake. It was me just literally being a human. And then I had, again, see what I mean when I say this, but I had another moment where I was super high of highs and then I came down low. I was sitting in a sauna. I like to go sit in the infrared sauna for 45 minutes. I actually was doing, this time I did something different. I did a sauna and a cold plunge. So you sit in the sauna for 9 minutes, you go in the cold tub for 3, and then you rest for 2, and then you do it again 3 times. I was so fearful of the cold plunge. I have gone to water therapy places before, and I've never been able to like sit in the cold pool. I've gone like up to my thighs maybe, and then I always just like back out and I get scared. I've never been able to like actually go in and sit for the amount of time you need to for your body to like register and like get the healing properties that come from cold plunges. But I was so numb at this sauna. It's like kind of funny to think about now. I was on the phone with like 3 different girlfriends, crying, like sobbing, barely making sense. I'm sitting in the sauna crying. I get into the cold tub. I'm talking to my best friend on the phone, and I get into the cold tub. I didn't even register what I was doing, and I'm sitting in there. And as I'm crying, I'm like looking around, and I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm fully in the cold tub sitting in here. Like I didn't hesitate. I was all the way in up to my chest. And I said to her on the phone, I was like, this is so insane. As I'm sobbing, crying to you, I'm sitting in a cold tub right now. And she was like, you're literally crazy. Um, but I just like had this moment where I was at the point where I felt so, I don't want to say lost because I know I'm not lost, but I just felt so overwhelmed. When you get into this point in like a spiritual awakening, it's almost like you see everything around you and all of the things you need to do and all of the things you want to accomplish. And you know there's going to be a lot of intense emotions that come with this awakening. And like I'm very self-aware of what's happening. So I just kind of had this moment where I like wanted to wave the white flag, I guess. And I was just breaking down. And then I hung up the phone and I just was like, God, universe, source, whoever she is up there, help me, like guide me. I feel so good some days and I feel so horrible others. I want to live in that good. I want to focus on that good. I want to backtrack that with, I also know there's experiences in life that aren't good. I do understand that. But if I can live the majority of my life in the present moment and that feels good, then I want that because I don't want to live in the past anymore. And I was telling Lex, the reason I wanted to re-record this episode was because I don't want to speak negatively about myself anymore. So as I'm like on my knees, scream crying to the universe in this sauna, I find myself unintentionally, I didn't even realize I was doing it until I was actually on the phone connected, but I was typing in tarot readers near me who can see me tonight. Like I needed an appointment within the next 20 minutes because your girl was going. And I picked the first one that popped up that looked just like it aligned with me. It kind of stood out to me. I didn't even really look at the website and what they offered. I just pressed call. I called the number and the tarot reader, the psychic Kristin, answered within a ring. And I was like, as soon as she said hello, it was like an immediate wave of calmness kind of came over my body. And I was like, I'm not going to this tarot for external validation or for a roadmap or to tell me what to do. But for a moment in that second, it felt like, okay, we can step outside of our body for a second. We can step outside of our emotions and we can trust that the universe, that our spirits, that our guides are going to speak through this tarot reader and give you the message you need right now. So I made an appointment. I get to her place 15 minutes later. Eyes are red, beet red. Like this woman looked at me and I could see in her eyes that she was like, oh my God, child, come here. I want to hold you. And I walk into her space and it was beautiful. She does the readings out of her home and it was stunning. If you live in the Chicago area, message me and I will let you know who it is. I haven't asked her yet if she's comfortable with me giving her information on the podcast, but I'm actually seeing her again today. So I can definitely ask. But as soon as I walked in her space, my energy just completely shifted. I felt like my shoulders relaxed. I felt like that barrier that I had up had kind of gone down. And she just kind of never met her before. She sat on the couch with me for a couple minutes before we started and it was just like holding space for me. And it was so beautiful. And it was like, this poor stranger probably thinks I'm crazy. So she asked me what brought me in today. And I've read before that you don't want to give tarot readers too much information because then they'll just take that info and they'll spin it back to you and through the cards. And that's just like things I've read. I don't know if that's true or not. So I was like very held back with the information I was giving her. I gave her very surface level things of why I came in tonight. I just kind of ran over a few points of I'm going through a separation with somebody at the moment who I deeply, deeply care about and who I deeply love. And I feel like I made a lot of mistakes in the process of that separation. And I told her I felt very disconnected from my body for a really long time. I didn't tell her much about the disconnection, but that's all I said. I just said, I feel like I've been making decisions based on not what I want. And I'm trying to figure out what that disconnect is. I said, and then that was it. So she has me shuffle the cards. And as I'm shuffling, I just close my eyes and she's like, I want you to be really intentional speak to the cards, tell them what you're looking for, tell them why you're here. If you don't know what you're looking for, tell them how you're feeling. And so I'm shuffling the cards. I held them on my heart and I made 2 wishes and I handed them back to her. As soon as I handed that card deck to her, I was very, um, like brought into my body, like very present. And that whole day, my mind was racing like a million miles per minute. And I couldn't like feel where my feet were. And for the first time all day, I really felt myself enter the room. And I did feel like it wasn't just me and her in there. I did feel like there was other people in the room, spirits, guides, whatever you want to say. So she starts to pull my cards and she's making kind of like this pattern in front of me with the cards, and every card she pulls, she's starting to explain more and go into more in depth. And we started out with why I was feeling so hurt over this separation. And then we started to get deep right away. And I won't tell you everything so I don't bore you to death. But this reader, Kristin, she was telling me things that I did not touch at all in our intro. I never told her any of these things. I didn't even hint at these things. She knew no information before. There was no like intake form. There was no website where I had to put an email in where you could possibly look up like my background. She only knew my name when I called her. And then I was there 15 minutes later. Like that was it. And it wasn't first and last name, by the way, it was just first name. So she started to tell me things about myself and my experiences that I hadn't even really registered about myself. But when she was speaking, I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And the biggest thing that resonated with me, and I think the biggest, and I think this is the biggest thing that resonated with me because it has a lot to do with so much more than the separation I'm going through right now, but it also has to do with my life, honestly, as a whole in general. She looked at me and she goes, I know you're not a negative person. I feel it. I see it. I can smell it. I have people walk in this room that I just know are negative people and we have to fix that. You're not a negative person. And she goes, but you are surrounded. Think about like a bubble around you or a jacket or whatever you want to think about. Just think about an aura, a bubble around you of negative energy. And she was like, and it's crazy because it's not yours. It's not coming from you. And I hadn't really told her about the disconnect in our intro. I just kind of told her I wasn't feeling like myself a little bit when I was making big decisions. And as she was speaking, she was like, when the world sees white, you see black. When the world sees black, you see white. Because this field of negativity around you isn't allowing your true essence to come through. So, which I'm just like replaying in my head right now, was so wild. And I just felt like, oh, that's why I've been feeling so disconnected. And I started to talk to her a little bit and I was like, for the last year, especially, I've had this heaviness and this feeling that I couldn't put my finger on. And I was trying so hard to find words for it. And I could never put my finger on until right this moment. Like my mind and my brain were thinking one thing, and then my body and my actions were doing the complete opposite. And it was so frustrating. It was so frustrating. I just felt like I was out of control at some points. And I was like, I can't name this with words. So how am I supposed to fix this or heal this or move past it? And then we went deeper into some things, and she had asked me if I had worked in a space that was heavy on holding on to others' energies. And I did not tell her I was in group fitness for the last 6 years. So that was crazy for her to hear. And she was just explaining how I constantly picking up the energies and emotions of others were kind of like glue sticking to me. And I told her I have felt like that before. I felt imposter syndrome, and I felt like I would teach these group fitness classes and I would leave feeling so empty because I wasn't even sure like who I was in the core, because I was just so used to holding space for others and taking their experiences and kind of making them my own, if that makes sense. So I've just been feeling again, I don't want to say lost over the last couple of years, but I haven't been feeling aligned. So essentially, after we talked a little bit more about what was going on and what I could do to help this, I decided to do a healing meditation / like shower prayer thing. So what happened was at 9:45 p.m. on the dot, I was going to go home, and at 9:45, I was going to get into my shower, no products, no soap, nothing, just turn the water on and stand under the water, close my eyes. And all I had to do was think positive thoughts. And she was like, if this is hard for you to do, which I won't lie, it's been really hard for me to stick with positive thoughts. Like I feel like, and it's gotten more intense as the years have gone by, but I feel like I see really positive things for my life. And then I always have that voice in the back of my head that comes back and it's like, but wait a second, you don't deserve that. Or wait a second, you haven't worked hard enough for that. Or that's not for you. And that's never going to happen. And that's too big and that's too far. And you're unlovable and you can't be with that person. So she was like, if it's hard for you to stay positive, which it is for me, think about anything that makes you happy. It can be dogs. It can be the beach. It doesn't have to be this like deep spiritual thing. So I'm like, okay, I'll go home. I get in the shower at the same time, 9:45 on the dot, just water, think positive thoughts for 15 minutes. While I was doing that, she was going back and she was going to sit in meditation and prayer and feed off of my positive energy to then block the negative energy that's been around me for a very long time. And we got into detail in the reading about how long I felt this way and how it's been, honestly, since I was like a kid. So she was like, this has been something that's been with you for a really long time. And over the years, it's only intensified. And that's why you've felt so disconnected to yourself. And she'd asked me why I decided now to get my first like official tarot reading. I've had my cards read virtually before, but never in person. And she asked me why now. And I told her, I just never felt like I was at a place, number one, that I wanted to know the truth because I always thought it was me that was messed up. And number two, I never felt like I was at a place to accept that there was going to be a lot of work that had to be done to feel good and to come out on the other side of it. Because you can go into a tarot card reading with two mindsets. You can say like, I'm going into this because I want to heal all of this and discover all of this, or you can go in for fun, listen to what she has to say, think it's cool, and then kind of leave and never address it again. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of like respect the cards and the purpose of them. And I just know up until this point in my life, I wasn't ready to face the cards, number one, and I wasn't ready to do the work, number two. And I was just never at a good place in my life because I think if I had gotten tarot read before, I would have picked out all of the wrong things to focus on, if that makes sense. For example, if I were to go to tarot after going through, let's say, this is a hypothetical. If I were to go to tarot after going through a breakup in college or even before that in high school, when I was in my like lover girl phase, I would be so heartbroken that all I would want is for the tarot reader to say like, they're your soulmate. They're going to come back for you. Wait for them. And I would have only fixated on that so hard. Same thing. Like if I had gone to tarot in the last couple of years, there were certain things in my life that I wanted to hear. So once I heard them, I knew I was just going to cling on to them. Versus now, I was at that like on my knees point where I will do anything to come into alignment with myself, that it didn't matter what she said to me. It didn't matter what stood out the most. I was ready to accept everything. And I'm ready to work on everything as a collective, which was really cool because I walked out of there feeling like I have a lot of work to do, but it feels so good that I want to do it all. I'm not just fixated on one part of my life. I'm not just fixated on one specific thing. And that's why I think it's kind of like a game changer for me now, is because in the past, I was always very fixated on healing one specific thing or one specific event that happened. I'm really excited for this journey, circling back to being on the phone with my girlfriend, because I had told her, don't you think I'm crazy when every other week I'm like reaching out saying I'm on the spiritual awakening, and then the next week I'm like crashing into depression? And she, of course, said no, because she's the best girlfriend anyone could ask for. And then I was like, But this is why I wanted to re-record the podcast. I was telling Lexi because I was like, this time feels so different. Number one, because I was so vulnerable on our last episode. I've never done that before in my life. Number two, I've come to a realization where I'm not just looking to fix certain things in my life. I'm looking at it as a collective, and it just feels different in my bones this time. I am no longer playing small. I don't want to play small. I no longer only want good things in certain areas of my life. I want good things all around, which includes family, job, career, future, relationship. It includes like the food I eat, the people I spend my time with. Like I'm not just fixated on one part of my life now. Like I'm looking at it all 360 perspective. And I was just like, I think I've come to the point where it's not worth it for me anymore to go to my ways of the past. It's just not. I don't want to live that way. And it's not worth it for me. It felt very aligned at the time. And it feels like all of the pieces. And then I kind of had this moment where I was like, okay, Kristin, all of the work you've done up until this point, though, all of the awakenings you felt were just kind of like little breadcrumbs to this moment. They weren't for nothing. So I didn't feel crazy either. I didn't feel like, oh my God, I feel like I'm always highest of high and lowest of low, that I have to, like, I'm crazy. There's no way that's true. I just kind of felt like the girl who cried wolf with a spiritual awakening. I had all these like ego feelings. And then I stopped and I was like, all of those tiny awakenings up into this moment were breadcrumbs. They were little teaser episodes, like trailers of a movie of what was to come for this big breakthrough. And I'm still very aligned that this is part of the process of like a Saturn return for sure, because it all does just like make sense. So it felt really good. And my ego is kind of silenced now because I did have a weird couple of weeks where I was backtracking and falling into old patterns and blowing up and having big meltdowns left and right. And to so quickly kind of like snap out of that was a little confusing to my ego. But then I realized, like, again, that's the human experience. I said it last episode. You can change your life whenever you want, whenever you're ready. So here we are, feeling good. Oh my God. So I am so proud to share these pieces of my journey with the community. It's so important to be able to hear a podcast where it's not just professional people coming on and sharing their skill set and telling you how to do something. It's kind of refreshing to share a piece of my life that I know others can relate to, because I know I've always looked for that in a podcast. And yeah, I would love to like hear from the community. Any questions you have ever, or anything you want to know about what I'm going through, my experiences, my journey. Like, I am an open book specifically within this community. I don't share a lot on my own personal Instagram as much anymore. I'm kind of like meh with that, but the podcast page, our Facebook page, any way you want to get involved or reach out to us, I am more than okay with sharing my experience a little more in depth. I have always been a storyteller, which is why I love teaching group fitness. So I really do love sharing pieces of me that can help someone else, because I know I always really appreciate and value that in someone else. Couple tips that I can give, like heading into the season, because I am just like scratching the surface. Like, it feels like, again, all those breadcrumbs led me to like this ginormous feast that I'm about to get to enjoy, this like spiritual awakening journey. Joe Dispenza has been a godsend for me. Oh my gosh. I don't No, I do know why I've resisted him in the past, because I just simply wasn't ready. I've put his meditations on before and I've watched stuff on YouTube, and it was always in one ear out the other. It really is crazy how spirit and universe will talk to you only when you're ready. And that's when you'll be able to listen, because I have been obsessed with listening to Joe Dispenza's stuff. The way he breaks down like the science of the brain and how all of the spiritual stuff he preaches is actually backed by science. It's kind of like a slap in the face to people that only believe in science, because it's like, look, this is spiritual, but it's also backed by real science. So for the people that need to like see to believe, here you go. His like TED Talks he does, the podcast he go on, I put on YouTube every day now. It's the first thing I put on when I wake up in the morning, and I'll just put on like a 20-minute clip of Joe Dispenza speaking. It has changed my life in such a short period of time. I am so lucky to have like found him at this moment, and I know it's not a coincidence. His whole teaching and method that he lives by is, and like honestly, it aligns with what the tarot card reader was saying to me as well. Negative experiences that happen in your life, in your past, cannot define your present and your future. And I was very much stuck into some icky stuff that's happened over the years. And I was very much living in that still, which was what was coming out and what was being projected to the world, and which was what was hurting the people I loved. It's like the best example he gives is, you roll into work one day and you're in the kitchen at work and you're all getting coffee and you're kind of chatting, catching up about your weekend. And someone says like, "Oh, Bob, how was your weekend?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was okay. But, I got really upset when so-and-so happened." And the other person's like, "Oh, well, why did that upset you?" And he's like, "Well, because 5 years ago, so-and-so did this thing to me. So it just really triggered me." And the other person's like, "Okay, well, that was 5 years ago. Like, why is it something that still triggers you now?" And he's like, "Well, because that thing happened to me, it's just completely changed me and altered me and changed my personality." When he was explaining this, my jaw was like on the floor. And I was like, "Oh my God, Kristin, you have said word for word before, like, I am the way I am because of what's happened to me." It makes me cringe. If you're watching it on YouTube, I just did a little, makes me cringe. And then Joe Dispenza goes on to break down that it is possible, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing. I want you to watch it for yourself, but it is possible to shape your present and your future based on your past if that's all you're thinking of. And people are like, "No," but then they're going into the office and they're saying, "I feel like shit because of the thing that happened to me 5 years ago." Like they're actively carrying that with them to alter their future. Like you can really live a terrible, miserable life. And it's not about letting go of things, but it's just about, the best way I can describe it is, and what I said recently was, it felt like when I had this like aha moment, it felt like my life was kind of like a whiteboard, a lot of different scribbles on it with expo markers, different colors from different walks of life, things that were bolded that stood out the most in my mind, traumatic events that have happened that were just like right dead center. The moment I started to accept, and the moment it really sank in my body, and again, there is no telling of time when this will click for you, because I've probably watched this Joe Dispenza video upward of 20 times and it never clicked for me until recently, because I was ready to like receive it. The moment you stop letting your thoughts be negative based on past experiences and trauma is the moment you start to change your reality. So it's like having that whiteboard with all of that different junk on it and wiping it clean with an eraser and then having it clean for the rest of your life. There is nothing that matters except right now and the future. What's happened before, it does not matter. And I kind of said that in last episode. I closed my eyes. I visualize exactly how I want my future to be in great detail. I open my eyes And that's how I continue my day for the rest of my day. A good thing that I've learned for me that I'm implementing right now, and it's only been a couple of days I've been doing this, but it's kind of like the negative self-talk thing I talked about on last episode. But the moment I start to visualize something in my future, maybe it's like a career goal or a school goal, I'll like start to think about it. And then I'll have that negative voice that's like, oh, but you can't do that. Or like, oh, that's going to be a lot of money. It'll never happen, or whatever it may be. I learned this from Joe Dispenza. Stop, catch yourself. Number one, I close my eyes and I bring myself back to that really positive thing that makes me happy, which for me is visualizing my future and exactly how it's going to look in great detail. I even see it now as I'm talking. And then I open my eyes and I move forward with my day with that energy. And another thing he explains in his talks, Joe Dispenza, is, side note, you should take a shot every time I say Joe Dispenza. But another thing he talks about is building habits and things like that. But it's kind of like, eventually those negative thoughts are going to be phased out with only positive ones, and only like your future casting and your visions for yourself, because that's just how the brain works. Because at some point you had to be repeating those negative things so many times that they became a habit, that it's absolutely possible for the brain to do the same thing with positive things. So cool. So nerdy. I'm like nerding out on this episode. Anyway, thank you to this community for holding space for me. Thank you to this community for never judging and for being a part of this growth journey. I know like 10 years from now, Lex and I are going to sit down together on a beach in California, and we're going to listen to these old episodes as we drink some rosé and watch the sunset, or a spicy marg and watch the sunset. And we're just going to laugh so hard and be like, aren't we so glad we never gave up? Oh, life is a journey, my friends, and we are in the thick of it. But I'm sending you so much love. I am asking you to go into this episode with an open heart. And I'm curious to think about what you hear when you hear this episode, before I had this kind of like awakening moment, and now, because you're definitely going to feel it's definitely different. My self-talk, the way I've viewed experiences, the way I feel about like how I act is definitely different in this episode. So it's crazy how quickly things can change. You can wake up and the rest of your life has changed. So I am having like a vulnerability hangover right now. Like, I don't think I've ever been that vulnerable in my life, let alone on a public platform. So that's where I'm at. Where are you at today, Lex?
Oh my gosh, I am so honored to feel your vulnerability, and your episode was powerful. And it wasn't powerful because you were talking about like deep shit, or you were admitting that you're not perfect, or that, this persona that you felt like you were putting on was a lie, because none of that is true. It was powerful because you were just expressing your honest human experience that so many people can relate to, and so many space holders can relate to. And even just before we started recording, like seeing you soft and confused and in this realm is powerful, because we need to be vulnerable in order to meet our power in a certain way. If we are just putting on a front that is strength and a front that is power, we're operating from the ego, and we're not operating from like our intuitive essence. And so if your lived experience right now is frustrated and a little sad, or a little confused, or a little vulnerable and hungover, it just is what the fuck it is.
Yeah, totally. I've had moments of being like, I don't even know how I remained that like intense and that strong for so long. And it's trusting the process and the journey, and these things will come to you when they're supposed to. But I'm like, I have so many flashbacks now of moments where I wish I could shake myself and be like, just let go a little bit and give in and like soften up, because I feel like I have a lot of resentment almost built up towards myself now.
Yeah. It's almost like the protection that you put on was programmed. I'm saying this because I can relate 100%. It was programmed into your being. And I've expressed this on this podcast. Like, it's been a huge work for me to try to let my walls down.
Yeah.
And also, my body is so intelligent for protecting me this whole time. So, whatever the root of where this started is, it doesn't matter. But what matters is now you're finally realizing that it's time to soften, and it's time to perhaps not be in the spotlight in that space holding way, because you need some space held for you in order to come back even stronger, right? Like, so many people don't ever let their guard down until they're behind closed doors. And that turns into depression, that turns into anxiety, that turns into self-harm in whatever ways, whether it be substance abuse or, distracting, distorting in any way. And so really listening to your episode, I was feeling, again, so honored to be in the presence of like such a vulnerable share, but also that this is the recalibration, and this is the move into the next level that perhaps your soul was calling and that you were avoiding, and you've made a lot of big shifts in your life the past 6 months. I mean, the past, girlfriend, you've made a lot of big shifts in your life the past like year, from moving from Chicago to New York to going back to teaching a lot again. Right? Like, you went back to teaching a lot, to being in a new relationship, to then deciding that you were going to go back to school and make the move again. Your body needs time for all of this to land, and your mind needs time and space so that the appropriate responses can like connect in the middle, And so I think what you brought to the episode, though, was so beautiful, because it is shame and guilt for having a human experience. And so many people feel shame and guilt for being tired, or for not wanting to go out and meet their friends, or for being depressed when they have a really beautiful life. I know I can relate to that. Like a couple weeks ago, I just was having a really bad depressive week. And my husband, he's always the best when it comes to like holding the space, but sometimes he really just doesn't get it. And he was like, "You're fine. You're doing so great. Look at everything you're doing right now in work. And look at all the impact you're making in your clients and your communities." And I was like, I know. And that's why this is fucked up, because I still don't feel good. Like, I still feel like I want to just go lay in bed. And so I was like, I just need you to say, okay, shit, you feel like that. Well, I'm here. I'll be downstairs if you need me. Because yeah, I got out of bed to be on calls and be with my clients because that shit lights me up. But there was just like a disconnect in the joy factor, or perhaps it's like physiological, like hormone deficiency. Like, maybe it's even, it's probably something deeper sometimes that we can even put our finger on, because we're not in that like medical field, right? And I mean, it's a mystery. Like, our body's a mystery, our human experience is a mystery, our brain is a mystery. But what is supportive is acceptance, and not letting what you're accepting mean anything about you. Like, none of this means anything about you. What you're going through right now means nothing about you. All it is information and insight, right?
I feel like when you're speaking, what's coming to me is, it reminds me of almost, I feel like sometimes I'm one of those people where it's like, those people who have everything and they're so happy or whatever, and then they self-sabotage, and then they're like, why does this person keep doing that when things are good? I feel like that's kind of what I felt close and related to the last couple of years, is like, I would get really good in fitness, and then I would like either move or go to a new company. I would be really secure in a relationship, and then I would put walls up and draw back. And I feel like, I don't know where it came from either. I wish I had a moment where I could go back to and be like, oh, this is why this happened. But it's so hard to understand my thought process versus my decisions. And that's something that I'm like working on and working to rewire now is how come my brain is telling me one thing, but then my decisions are the other. Like, for example, going back to school, leaving school in the first place, like my brain was like, you should finish school. Like you want to be in school when I was there a year and a half ago. And then I made the decision to pull out and go back into fitness full time. And I was like, what am I doing? I was in a really solid relationship for the last year and a half. And my brain psyched me out when I moved to Chicago. I pulled out and I was like, what am I doing? I feel like I keep getting trapped in those loops and it's a lot to rewire. And I know it's the human experience, but it's like, oh my God, I just want to understand the why behind everything. And I think I need to stop rushing that.
Yeah, there is a root to it though. Like there is a root to it. And I feel like you do know. And I feel like, you know, what I'm feeling is that perhaps it has something to do with your power. And like, I don't feel that it's like a worthiness thing with you because I totally feel like you know your worth, but it could be like that feeling of like what I'm picturing is like my hands are like so powerful and all of a sudden I start to feel them and I'm like, holy shit, this is a lot of electricity. And I'm just like, oh shit, I can do whatever I want. You're telling me I can do whatever I want with my hands. I can have the best relationship. I can make money. I can finish school. I can open a studio, right? And then all of a sudden we're like, and I'm like, I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a lot of pressure. That sounds like a lot of work. That sounds like I can't hold it all by myself. That sounds like who the fuck do I think I am? Right. And the body does not know the difference between a threat and an exciting opportunity. In the body just feels this is energy I have not felt in a long time, or this is energy I have not felt ever, right? Is this a threat to my health? Or is this going to stretch me beyond my mental capacity? But I know that this is a good leap for me, right? The body just wants to keep you safe. So whether that's in a relationship or an opportunity, you know, I think to go deeper into your nervous system's innate responses would be really helpful for you. It could go back to childhood. It could go back to whichever way we most responded to protect ourselves as a kid. Those ways developed in our adulthood. And a lot of times we're unconscious of the development of the ways we protect ourselves, right? So for me with dating, it was like, I always dated guys that I knew subconsciously were not who I was going to marry, were not who I was going to build a life with, but I would almost like trick myself into thinking that I was to be in the relationship. But it was like, not enough, just enough for me to leave the relationship and be like, well, he wasn't that dude. And so I got to go because I wasn't ready for a relationship because I didn't trust myself in a relationship because I had a lot of healing to do when it came to relationships. And I still do until my last relationship before my husband showed me a lot about the relationship healing I needed to do because he brought up a lot about my dad and my mom's relationship. And I did give him my all. And he's the one that broke my heart because he wasn't the man for me that I wanted him to be. But that last relationship allowed for the pause, which was the recalibration for me before I decided to date my husband seriously.
So powerful. Do you feel like you ever were in like that self-sabotaging phase too?
Oh yeah, for sure. I still am. I still am. And it's like, you know, there's levels to self-sabotage. There's like really direct self-sabotage that you're just like, what the fuck are you doing? Like you may have those friends or I won't even work with clients that are like that. But again, there's these unconscious ways we self-sabotage. It could be because in the past you knew that making the smaller decision was going to allow for your parents to be like more laxed within you moving through life. So maybe to not overactivate them, you decided to play a little smaller.
Yeah.
And so the more you do that, the more your body gets used to playing smaller, you know. And like I said with you, love, is like you've gone through a lot of shifts the past year. And even if you consciously thought you were giving yourself space to recalibrate, you know, it doesn't seem like you were.
Mm-mm.
And
Mm-mm.
so this is the universe, and this is your body, most importantly, being like, feel your fucking feelings, bitch. Get mad, be confused, blow up your shit. Do
Yeah.
it, because it's like time to fly from here, you know.
Yeah.
And if you just continue to pretend like everything's okay, all you're doing is putting off your process of evolution.
Quote that. That needs to be quoted because that's how I felt the last couple years. And I think it's almost, we talked about this, you and I talked about this. It's the athlete mindset of like, you can't crumble under pressure. And I played a
Girl.
lot of solo sports, and it's wild now how it's coming back. And I played sports up until I was 18. So I played sports longer than I haven't. I'm 28. So it's
Yeah.
wild how we never process these things. And it doesn't matter if you go pro or play in college or not. I was so integrated into that mindset from such a young age of I can't show if I'm breaking, everything has to be good. I can't show if I'm
Yep.
cracking, carrying the team on
Yep.
my back type of energy. And now what?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up. When you told the story about your high jump
Oh
experience, I
God.
was like, this is so good though. You know, like you said, I got cocky, and I bet you could. You said you could, but I bet I could feel the visceral reaction
Oh yeah.
because you know, I still have moments like that with sports. And it was funny, we were driving to LA the other day, and me and my husband were talking about the same exact thing. You know, I was really good at sports, and it felt so good to be good at sports and to carry the team. And to go a little deeper, my dad was my coach in a lot of my sports, and he was probably, you know, the happiest I ever saw him in my whole life when he was coaching me.
Mm,
And so it was like, yes, I'm really good at it, but was also like, I'm good at it and it's making my dad happy. And it's not in the way of like it's not in the way of your parents living through you because they weren't good at sports. That's not like what I'm talking about. My dad has been through a lot of trauma. And so he doesn't know how to express himself. But with sports, he was able to tap into these enlightening emotions, these elevating emotions, especially watching his kids play sports,
yeah.
that he wasn't able to tap into when we were just at home. Straight up. It's definitely a nervous system thing, and his nervous system, I'm sorry, but it is broken. And even to this day, like he's trying, but he has a neurological disconnect because of the body, which is his
Yeah.
system. And
Yeah.
so, anyways, within sports, I was like, I'm going to be good. This is going to be where we connect. This is going to be where he feels good. This is going to be where he gets relief. And it was like that because even when I would do like bad or I would strike out or have a bad day, he was still the softest I ever saw him. He wasn't one of those parents that were like, you're a piece of shit, like you struck
Yeah.
out. It was more so we were still in the like container of sports, so he was able to like comfort me more, right? And so anyways, speaking back to the programming, I got programmed to just be good at everything I do. Like, what a dope program, right? Until it's not. Until I started to want to win at every single thing I did beyond sports. So I played 2 years of college softball. I was still one of the best on the teams. We weren't the best team. But then when I decided to go into radio and not continue playing softball, I was like, okay, I'm going to be the best at the radio station. I want every opportunity, and I would take every opportunity, and I would get every opportunity until all the opportunities I was getting was not aligned with my truth. And then all of
Mm,
a sudden I didn't know who the fuck I was because I was just following the competitive thread and not the thread of my essence.
mm,
And I did this in relationships. I did this like if it was like a dude I was with who I knew liked another girl, and I was also someone he was into. I would do anything to like hook up with him so that
Yeah.
he chose me and not her, which is another fucking rabbit hole we could go into. But like, these are the threads of conditioning that literally guide us through life. And so just the awareness of this conditioning is powerful. And also going back to your episode, the putting the voice to the awareness is
Yeah.
more powerful. And just finishing this thought, my husband played a little bit of pro soccer as well. And when he couldn't because of his hip, his whole worth was thrown out the window because he loved the feeling, the serotonin hit, if you will, of getting the slap on the ass from his teammates when he made the winning goal, or being the big man on campus. What the fuck ever, right? Toxic masculinity at its finest. But from some divine source, he was put in a position to give himself the credibility that sports gave him based off of just who the fuck he is in the human experience. And that's what we're missing. We're
Yeah.
looking for validation from outside sources, and if we don't get it, it means something about who we are. And so what you shared so beautifully was, I'm done with looking for validation from outside sources. In the fitness space, that's even bigger. I don't want to wake up to teach a 6 a.m. class, but then I go teach a 6 a.m. class and everybody tells me how good I am at what I do. And all of a sudden I'm okay. Like, that's bullshit.
I wish I had the self-awareness that I do now a couple years ago, because I can't tell you how many times I thought the same thing, and like how many walks of life I've gone down just picking up, like you were saying, who I thought I was based on external validation. And obviously I'm still young, like I'm only 28. I have plenty of life to like find my true essence and what I really want to do and who I really want to be. But it is a little freaky to think about the last couple years, like what path was I walking? Like who was I? A big thing that played a factor into my last relationship was I felt so disconnected from myself that I felt like I couldn't show up for this person that I loved so much. And when they would ask me like, well, what do you mean you feel disconnected from yourself? Like, how can I help? What can I do? I still didn't even have the words, because I was like,
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm feeling right now. But all I know is that over the last couple of years, like to this point now, I don't even know who I am. Like, what is my essence, what I was here to do. And it all came flooding back to me the last couple of months that I was just built on the validation around me. And it is like kind of scary to think about. And it makes me like a little sad, because then I feel like a little lost puppy again. And I haven't felt like this in a really long time, but it's exciting at the same time. But then I also have like, ooh, but because I got so much validation back then, like, should I just stay in that space and be that person that people think I was? Because she obviously was a great person. Like, I almost then make decisions to go back into fitness or something like that. Like this big circle spiral where I'm like, I just
Yeah.
need to be where my fucking feet are.
Yeah. Well, you are that person. You were meant to do exactly everything you've ever done.
Right.
You were born
Right.
to hold space. You were born to be on a microphone. You were born to make dope playlists. You were born to make people feel fucking alive. You were. The essence is that you were born to make people feel fucking alive.
Yeah.
In what container, that will change.
Right.
And that's a huge thing that I kind of tapped into at my retreat, is like, I'm ready to play bigger. I'm not ready to blow my life up and be a different person. I'm ready to be exactly who the fuck I am, but my vision is bigger.
Mm.
Right. So it all starts somewhere, and everything you've done up until this point is your essence. Right.
Right.
But your vision is changing. The way you want to be in relationship is changing. Your, like your foundation is changing, your core values are changing, and that's okay. And I feel like when our core values begin to change, our life can feel like it's turning upside down. But
Yeah.
what you do have is your essence, right? You do have your essence. It's like, now we just have to figure out how to move in the direction that is the bigger vision.
Mm. I want to talk about why it's so hard to forgive ourselves, but so easy to forgive other people. Because forgiveness, I think, is the most powerful tool we can use. I have forgiven lots of people in my life. I've taken space in like friendships and relationships, whatever it may be, but I've then looked back at that person and been like, oh, I could totally reach out to them now. Like I forgive them for the pain they caused me or what they've done. But then when it comes to myself and making mistakes myself, it's 10 times harder to show forgiveness to myself. I'm questioning, like, is that an ego thing? Is that just because I haven't
I think
practiced
that's a
forgiveness with
Pisces
myself?
thing.
Fuck. Yeah.
Because my husband is like that too. And I don't know, I think it's just, it goes back to you being the main character in every single thing that you do. Not only the main character, like in the spotlight, but like holding the source of energy in every relationship that you have, even the relationship with yourself. So when
Yeah.
you let yourself down, it's like God letting us down, right?
Mm,
Which, I mean, I think can also be really powerful when you perceive it a certain way, because we hold ourselves to high standards when we value who we are and our essence, right? And yeah, that's just going to be like you having to loosen up. You're going to have
yeah.
to you're going to have to practice, like, what does it look like to fail and be okay with that? Because for me, it's harder for me to forgive people. It's harder for me to reach
Mm,
back out to someone that did me dirty. I'm over it. I'm already over it. I can't even think of anybody um that did me dirty or that I didn't necessarily communicate well with about like our truth that I would reach out to. Nobody,
wow.
not one fucking
Interesting.
person. Don't give a fuck. But I forgave myself a lot because I've done a lot of shit. And so you have too, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't.
Yeah. You're right. It's human experience is just wild. And now that I've like tapped into this next kind of portal that I'm jumping into, I see it. But then at the same time, it's like you can kind of craft the way you want the rest of this time here on earth to go. And that too is like an overwhelming experience for me as well. So it's just kind of like practicing being present, but at the same time, excited for the future, I guess. And I hope this is like a helpful conversation for some people out there, because I know after the episode dropped, we had a lot of people reach out just expressing like how helpful it was and how hearing stories like this is so relatable. Because I feel like when you come to the podcasting space, you're looking for advice and you're just getting flooded with advice from people on how to make your life better. And there's not much like vulnerability in the space of like, oh, this person's actually where I'm at right now and they don't have the answers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important to be vulnerable and like allow people to not feel so alone, because in the wellness space, it is somewhere where someone who doesn't know how to start or doesn't know how to forgive themselves or doesn't know who their essence is or what their essence feel like,
Mm.
can feel really alone. And that's just the premise of our podcast is
Mm.
we want y'all to feel like you're here with us at this table, having some tea, having some wine, and just being like completely honest with yourself. Be
Mm-hmm.
honest with yourself. And honesty doesn't have to be scary either, right? It's like we have this perception of, holy shit, if I say I want to really see my truth, what am I going to see? Right? If I
Mm.
want to really start to heal my wounds, what am I going to see? I don't want to see my wounds. I know I've been through some shit. And it goes back to my ayahuasca journey. I was very scared to see what I needed to heal. I was very scared to see some of the trauma I know I've been through and haven't looked at. But when it came to it, it wasn't scary. It was
Mm.
just like, oh, that's a part of me and it's a part of my truth and it's a part of my story, but that doesn't mean anything about who I am. And so if you are even on a lesser scale, not happy with your body right now, or you're in some like emotional eating cycle, take a second, give yourself some compassion, make a decision or book a class
Yeah.
or hit up a friend and say, I need some accountability. Will you go to Pilates with me 2 times a week? And if I go to back out, will you just remind me of the invitation I gave you to hold me accountable, right?
Mm.
We don't have to stare our biggest demons in the eye to grow, but we do have to accept that there are demons there trying to keep us small.
Wow. I mean, oh,
Mm.
so good. Because that's like, it's kind of like the opposite of what everyone tells you to do. They're like, you have to face your problems and like work through them right away, or you're going to carry it into the next relationship or the next career, whatever it is. And that's where I feel like I always struggled, was like, I felt the need to show up in every aspect
Yeah.
perfect. And then it's even circling back to like the sports thing, because if you make one mistake, you can't make it again the next time, because then you're
Yeah.
losing or you're not winning or the team's going to be mad at you, whatever it is. God, it's so crazy the way things manifest in our life. I actually had a really vulnerable conversation with my mom the other day, and I was telling her a little bit about what was going on. And I was telling her about a previous relationship in the past that I felt like, and her and I weren't really close until after that breakup. I was with someone for 6 years, and I'd moved home during COVID. We got close during that time because I was like at my lowest of low and I just really needed my mom.
Mm.
And before that, we were just kind of like, she was never the mom to ask about boys after school or like relationships and things like that. So we were never open to that side of our relationship between her and I, but we had gotten close during that time. And I kind of felt like after getting closer with her, I was able to come to her with some more things, but I still had hesitations until recently, where I was like vulnerable with her again. And I had opened up about how I thought that first relationship I was in had really messed me up now. And I'm just starting to see it years later. And you know, when you are vulnerable with parents about these things and they're like, oh, mental health is like not a thing. Like, no,
Yeah.
you're just like overwhelmed right now. But she actually
Mm.
like sat with it and she was like, no, you know, you're right. Like what had happened in the past and this person you were with and what had happened after, it was not okay. And I can see why you carry like such burdens from that relationship and why you show up in newer relationships with that weight on your chest, because there was a lot of hurt in there. There was a lot of distrust and there was a lot that was placed on my shoulders that I felt the need to have to carry, that I told myself when I
Mm.
get into another relationship, I never want to feel this way again. But that
Mm.
can't, it's like the sports thing. That can't always happen. Like we can't always
Yeah.
stop doing something, because the moment I started to feel those things again in a more recent relationship, I ran away from it. And because I
Yeah.
was like, I can't fail at this again. I can't like let the people in my life down. I have to protect myself and I have to protect people around me.
Yeah. And your body remembered how horrible that breakup
Oh,
was.
it's
And
like
so
it's visceral.
again,
Yeah.
right. And so back to your body doesn't know the difference. Your body isn't like, okay, this is not the same person. Your
Mm.
body is just like, oh shit, I remember this. I remember this. And then I remember 6 months later what also happened. Right. The body remembers everything. And whether it's sports, a relationship, um, trying out for a team and or trying, applying for a job. My husband and I were fucking so excited. We were second in line, not even second in line. It was between me. I haven't even told you this yet, but it was between us and this other family for the most perfect place in Bend. And you guys have no, I've been wanting to move to Bend. We just want to find the perfect place first. And when I was in Mexico, he sent it to me and it had like this perfect studio that I could turn into a meditation space and da 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 da. We were so excited. The woman was making us feel like we got it. Like literally, she was making us feel like we got it for like the whole weekend. And then Sunday night, I'm laying in bed, like watching, I'm just Sunday was Sundaying. And he comes in and he's just like, we didn't get it. Right. And so
Oh.
in that moment, our both of us were really disappointed and we were really angry and like pissed and like why did she make us feel like we got it. And so that disappointment that I felt in my body is no different than disappointment when my crush picked another crush or when I didn't get the job that I applied for, right? Disappointment is disappointment, but the growth is being with the disappointment, being like, I'm fucking pissed, I'm disappointed, and then giving it half an hour
Mm.
and letting it fucking go. because it's when we allow the energy of disappointment, the energy of heartbreak, the energy of loss sit in the body, and we don't move the energy out, or we don't just decide to say, hey, like, okay, I felt this enough. And I see a bigger vision beyond this disappointment. That's when that gets stuck in the body, and it snowballs with other over activating sensations that turned into whatever, illness, heaviness, insecurity, doubt about the next stuff, right? So it's like we could have easily been like, well, we're not going to apply for anything else. We'll just stay where we are in San Diego. It's fine. It's not fine though, and we're going to continue to look, and that's okay. It's like, if not this, then something better.
Yeah. I would love to get there. I would love to get there. And I would love to be able to have those reactions to situations, because it doesn't matter how different the person or the thing is leading up to when you start to feel those feelings, because you're so right, the body still feels it. And I would just love to get to a place of being able to express those things in the moment, and just like not feel the need to hold on to everything, and let everything just like be super communicative with where I'm at. But it's a process for sure. And I am real deep in it, real deep, people.
I'm so grateful again, just for you sharing your story. And I'm sure our community is so grateful. And it just is like, it's just life. And we would love to hear your guys' stories. If you're going through something right now, drop it in the comments, send us a message, like, let us hold space for you. And let us just be that ear, right? That sounding board, because there's no one on this planet right now that is not going through some type of emotional exploration weekly.
Speaking of emotional exploration, while I was nursing my vulnerability hangover, you were doing some more cool things. Tell us where you've been at the last couple weeks, because I want to know.
So I taught at 2 retreats in Mexico. The first one was in Tulum, and I've never been to Tulum. It was like so beautiful, so incredible. And I got to teach this like yoga lattes breathwork class that I created every morning on the beach. And then I got to teach different workshops throughout the weekend. So one of the workshops was just a simple breathwork workshop, because the community that came to this retreat was very new to this side of wellness. They were familiar with movement, but they weren't as familiar with like breathwork and manifestation and somatics. And so it was really cool to be able to hold space for their exploration. I was just so honored, and it was really epic. And then from there, I flew to Puerto Vallarta, and then we held a retreat in Sayulita for the Academy of Breath. I co-facilitate a certification with my homegirl. This was for our advanced practitioner training. And so it was basically 7 days of like deep embodiment, deep exploration. And these women that were on the retreat are teachers, leaders, space holders. And so it was just like a deep calibration into their next level leader, because the world needs more embodied leaders. And so, yeah, it was just like a portal of, again, just exploration and expression. And it was really beautiful. And I feel like that's probably why I am so grounded right now as I hold space for you through this, because it's just it's like beautiful, right? It is. It's just so beautiful. And I know what's on the other end of this. And because I know you and I feel you and I know your essence, I know what's on the other end of this is like fucking gonna be phenomenal. But yeah, I'm again, my vision is so big right now from spending 7 days with these women. And I realized that I'm playing a little bit small, and I'm ready to play bigger. And I'm not judging myself for playing small, but I'm aware that, oh, I'm a little comfortable. And so, yeah, there's some big stuff coming in my world, in our world, and I cannot wait to continue to share it with our community.
what are the type of people that show up to these retreats? Like, are people going to
Mm.
something like this looking for something like soul searching? Because if that's the case, I need to get on an ASAP. But I'm sure a
Some
lot of people
people,
wonder that. Like, do you have to be super into yoga to be going to these things? Like, what's the vibe?
yes. It just depends. You know what? There are so many dope retreats out there that are just developed for literally any type of person. So
Right.
if you guys are curious about retreats, literally just Google it, because the first one was with the studio that I teach at in San Diego. So the studio owner basically just put it on, and then she put it out to the public, and most of the people that joined are members of the studio, and a couple people weren't. But yeah, we did like an intention setting ceremony, and it was, there were people there from all walks of life. There was someone going through a breakup. There was someone wanted to be in relationship with themselves and their body in a different way. There was someone that was considering leaving corporate America and starting their own thing. Like, so I feel like a retreat is really good when you're on the edge of a breakthrough, but you need some support and you need community to hold you through it.
I would love that. I know that
Mm.
a lot of people go to these looking for an answer, but then coming back, just like kind of discovering the answer is within you the whole time. And I think that's so important. And people who are like, don't really understand retreats, it's because your ego is a little bit in denial that you have all the answers in within you, I think.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely been someone who was like, oh, I don't need to spend that much money to go somewhere where I know I can just find the answer myself. But sometimes you do need to be facilitated a little bit. So I appreciate that for
Mm.
sure. I think a wellness for the hot mess retreat should be a thing in the future.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that it will
Yeah.
be incredible. And what I learned from a space holder's perspective is that I do have the capacity to do this. I never really
Yeah.
desired to teach at retreats. I mean, of course, if the opportunity came, I was like down for it, but it was a little daunting to think about holding space for 7 days straight with
Yeah.
my partner. But in person is so powerful. It is so powerful. It is so elevating. It is how humans are supposed to grow and transform. And yeah, we have to plan a retreat.
Yeah. I would
Yes.
love nothing more. Let's manifest that for, I don't even want to say
Yes.
2024. I want to say let's manifest that like at least scheduling it sometime this year or just
Yeah.
thinking about the
Yeah.
logistics. How amazing that would
Let's do
be.
it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh man. Well, thank you for holding space for me today, Lex. And I just want to thank this community for continuing to hold space for me. It's been a vulnerable time for sure. And I'm so lucky and so blessed to have this platform to just be open on. And I think that's really cool. But as you can tell, like I'm still definitely nursing a vulnerability hangover. And Lex is just sitting here so grounded, just like, bitch, you are batshit crazy right now. You're going to see in like the other
I've been
side.
there.
You're going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So thank you for holding space for us. And we'll see you on another episode of Wellness for the Hot Mess soon.
Peace out.